Chapter 14. Matilda sat down again at her desk. The Trunchbull seated herself behind the teacher's table. It was the first time she had sat down during the lesson, and she reached out a hand and took hold of her water jug, still holding the jug by the handle but not lifting it yet. She said, "I have never been able to understand why small children are so disgusting. They are the bane of my life. They're like insects. They should be got rid of as early as possible. We get rid of flies with fly spray by hanging up by fly paper. I have often thought of inventing a spray of getting rid of small children. How splendid it would be to walk into this classroom with a gigantic spray gun in my hands and start pumping it, or better still, some huge strips of sticky paper. I will hang them all around the school and you all get stuck to them, and that will be the end of it. Wouldn't that be a good idea, Miss Honey?" "If it's meant to be a joke, Headmistress, I don't think it's a very funny one," Miss Honey said from the back of the class. "You won't you, Miss Honey?" the Trunchbull said. "And it's not meant to be a joke. My idea of a perfect school, Miss Honey, is one that has no children at all. One of these days I shall start a school like that. I think it will be very successful." The woman's mad, Miss Honey was telling herself. She's round the twist. She's the one who ought to be got rid of. The Trunchbull now with the large broken water jug and poured some water into her glass, and suddenly with the water out came a long slimy newt straight to the glass. The Trunchbull let out a yell and wrapped up her chair as though a firecracker has gone off underneath her. And now the children also saw the long-seen slimy yellow belly lizard-like creature twisting and turning in the glass, and it screamed and jumped about as well, shouting, "What is it? Oh, it's disgusting! It's a snake! It's a baby crocodile! It's an alligator! Look out, Miss Trunchbull!" cried Lavender. "I'll bet it bites!" The Trunchbull, this mighty female giant, stood there in her green breeches, quivering like a blanket. She was especially furious that someone had succeeded in making her jump and yell like that because this prided herself on her toughness. She stared at the creature, twisting and wriggling in the glass. Curiously enough, she had never seen a newt before. Natural history was not her strong point. She hadn't the faintest idea what this thing was. It certainly looked extremely unpleasant. Slowly she sat down again in her chair. She looked at this moment more terrifying than ever before. The fires of fury and hatred were smoldering in her small black eyes. "Matilda!" she barked. "Stand up!" "Who, me?" Matilda said. "What have I done?" "Stand up, you disgusting little cockroach." "I haven't done anything, Miss Trunchbull." "Honestly, I haven't. I've never seen that slimy thing before." "Stand up at once, you filthy little maggot." Reluctantly, Matilda got to her feet. She was in the second row. Lavender was in the row behind her, feeling a bit guilty. She hadn't intended to get her friend into trouble. On the other hand, she was certainly not about to own up. "You are a vile, repulsive, rapid, monstrous little brute," the Trunchbull was shouting. "You are not fit to be in this school. You ought to be. I shall have you driven out of this establishment in utter disgrace. I shall have the prefect chase you down the corridor and out of the front door with hockey sticks. I shall have the staff escort you home under armed guard, and then I shall make absolutely sure you're sent to a reformatory for delinquent girls for the minimum of 40 years. The Trunchbull was in such a rage that her face had taken on a boiled color, and little flecks of front were gathering at the corners to her mouth. But she was not only the only one who was losing her cool. Matilda was also beginning to see red. She didn't in the least mind being accused of having done something she had actually done. She could see the justice of that. It was, however, a totally new experience for her to be accused to a crime that she definitely had not committed. She had had absolutely nothing to do with that. Trunchbull isn't going to pin this one on me. "I did not do it!" she screamed. "Oh, yes, you did," the Trunchbull roared back. "Nobody else could have done a trick like that. Your father was right to warn me about you." The woman seemed to have lost control of herself completely. She was ranting like a maniac. "You are finished in the school, young lady," she shouted. "You are finished everywhere. I shall personally see to it what you are put away in a place where not even the crows and land their droppings on you. You will probably never see the light of day again." "I'm telling you I did not do it," Matilda screamed. "I've never been seen a creature like that in my life." "You have put a crocodile in my drinking water," the trunchbull yelled back. "There's no worse crime in the world against a headmistress. Now sit down and don't say a word. Go on, sit down at once." "But I'm telling you," Matilda shouted, refusing to sit down. "I am telling you to shut up," the trunchbull roared. "If you don't shut up at once and sit down, I shall remove my belt and let you have it with the end that has a buckle." Slowly Matilda sat down. Oh, the rudeness of it all. The unfairness. How dare they expel her for something she hadn't done? Matilda felt herself getting angrier and angrier and angrier, so unbearably angry that something was bound to explode inside her very soon. The next was still swimming in the tall glass of water. It looked horribly uncomfortable. The glass was not big enough for it. Matilda glared at the trunchbull. How she hated her! She glared at the glass with the newt in it. She longed to march up and grab the glass and tip the contents, newt and all, over the trunchbull's head. She trembled to think what the trunchbull would do to her if she did that. The trunchbull was sitting behind the teacher's table, staring with a mixture of horror and fascination at the new wriggling in the glass. Matilda's eyes were also embedded in the glass. And now, quite slowly, there began to creep over Matilda a most extraordinary and peculiar feeling. The feeling was mostly in the eyes. A kind of electricity seemed to be gathering inside them. A sense of power was burning in those eyes of her. A feeling of great strength was settling itself deep inside her eyes. But there was also another feeling which was something else altogether, and which she could not understand. It was like flashes of lightning. Little waves of lightning seemed to be flashing out of her eyes. Her eyeballs were beginning to get hot, as though vast energy was building up somewhere inside them. It was an amazing sensation. She kept her eyes steadily on the glass, and now the power was concentrating itself in one small part of each eye and growing stronger and stronger and stronger. It felt as through millions of tiny little invisible arms with hands on them were shooting out of her eyes towards the glass she was staring at. "Tip it," Matilda whispered. "Tip it over." She saw the glass wobble. It actually tilted backwards a fraction of an inch. She righted itself again. She kept pushing at it with all those millions of invisible little arms and hands that were reaching out from her eyes, feeling the power that was flashing straight from the two little black dots in the very centers of her eyeballs. "Tip it," she whispered again. "Tip it over." Once more the glass wobbled. She pushed harder still, wanting her eyes to shoot out more power. And then, very, very slowly, so slowly she could hardly see it happening, the glass began to lean backwards, farther and farther and farther backwards, until it was balancing on just one edge of its base. And there it teetered for a few seconds before finally toppling over and falling with a sharp tinkle on the desktop. The water in it and the squirming newt splashed over Miss Trunchbull's enormous bosom. The headmistress let out a yell that must have rattled every window pane in the building, and for the second time in the last 5 minutes, the shot out of her chair like a rocket. The newt clutched desperately at the cauldron's mouth where it covered the great chest, and there it clung its new claw-like feet. The trunchbull looked down and saw it, and she bellowed even louder, and with a swipe of her hand, she sent the creature flying across the classroom. It landed on the floor beside Lavender's desk, and very quickly she ducked down and picked it up and put it into her pencil box for another time. A newt, she decided, was a useful thing to have around. The trunchbull, her face more like a boiled ham than ever, was standing before the class, quivering with fury. Her massive bosom was heaving in and out, and the splash of water down the front of it made a dark wet patch that had probably soaked right through the skin. You did it, she roared. Come on, own up, step forward. You won't escape this time. Who is responsible for this dirty job? Who pushed over this glass? Nobody answered. The whole room remained silent as a tomb. Matilda, she roared. It was you. I saw it was you. Matilda, in the second row, sat very still and said nothing. A strange feeling of serenity and confidence was sweeping over her, and all of a sudden she found that she was frightened by nobody in the world. With the power of her eyes alone, she had compelled a glass of water to tip and spill its contents over the horrible headmistress, and anybody who could do that could do anything. Speak up, you call it carbuncle, roared the Trunchbull. Admit that you did it. Matilda looked right back into the flashing eyes of this infuriated female giant and said with total kindness, I have not moved away from my desk, Miss Trunchbull. Since the lesson began, I can say no more. Suddenly, the entire class seemed to rise up against the headmistress. She didn't move, they cried out. Matilda didn't move. Nobody moved. You must have knocked it over yourself. I most certainly did not knock it over myself, roared the Trunchbull. How dare you suggest a thing like that? Speak up, Miss Honey. You must have seen everything. Who knocked over my glass? None of the children did, Miss Trunchbull, Miss Honey answered. I can vouch for that. Nobody has moved from his or her desk all the time you've been here, except for Nigel, and his has not moved from his corner. Miss Trunchbull glared at Miss Honey. Miss Honey met her gaze without flinching. I am telling you the truth, headmistress, she said. You must have knocked it over without knowing it. That sort of thing is easy to do. I am fed up with you loose bunch of midgets, roared the Trunchbull. I refuse to waste any more of my precious time in here. And with that she marched out of the classroom, slamming the door behind her. In the stunned silence that followed, Miss Honey walked up to the front of the class and stood behind her table. Phew, she said. I think we have enough school for one day, don't you? The class is dismissed. You may all go out into the playground and wait for your parents to come and take you home. the Trunchbull barked. In fact, you strike me as the sort of poisonous farmer that you always be wrong. You sit wrong, you look wrong, you speak wrong, you are wrong all round. I'll give you one more chance to be right. Spell what? Eric hesitated. Then he said very slowly, it's not W-O-T and it's not W-H-O-T. I know. It must be W-H-O-T-T. Standing behind Eric, the Trunchbull reached out and took hold of the boy's 2 ears, one with each hand, pinching them between forefinger and thumb. Ow! Eric cried. Ow, you're hurting me! I haven't started yet, the Trunchbull said briskly, and now taking a firm grip with his 2 ears, he lifted him bodily out of his seat and held him aloft. Like Rupert before him, Eric schooled the house down. From the back of the classroom, Miss Hurney cried out, Miss Trunchbull, don't! Please let him go, his ears might come off. They'll never come off, the Trunchbull shouted back. I have discovered through long experience, Miss Honey, that the ears of small boys are stuck very firmly to their heads. Let him go, Miss Trunchbull, please, begged Miss Honey. You could damage him. You really could. You could wrench him right off. Ears never come off, the Trunchbull shouted. They stretch most marvelously, like these are doing now, but I can assure you they never come off. Eric was squealing louder than ever and paddling the air with his legs. Matilda had never before seen a boy, or anyone else for that matter, held aloft by his ears alone. Like Miss Honey, she felt sure both ears were going to come up at any moment with all the weight that was on them. The Trunchbull was shouting, the word what is spelled W-H-A-T. Now spell you little word. Eric didn't hesitate. He had learned from watching Rupert a few minutes before the quicker you answer, the quicker you are released. W-H-A-T, he squealed. Spells what? Still holding him by the ears, the Trunchbull lowered him back to his chair behind his desk. Then she marched back to the front of the class, dusting up her hands once against the other like someone who was been handling something rather grimy. That's the way to make them learn, Miss Honey, she said. You take it from me. It's no good just telling them. You got to hammer it into them. There's nothing like a little twisting and twiddling to encourage them to remember things. It concentrates their minds wonderfully. You could do them permanent damage, Miss Trunchbull, Miss Honey cried out. Oh, I have. I'm quite sure I have, the Trunchbull answered, grinning. Eric's ears will have stretched quite considerably in the last couple of minutes. They'll be much longer now than they were before. There's nothing wrong with that, Miss Honey. I'll give him an interesting pixie look for the rest of his life. But Miss Trunchbull... Oh, do shut up, Miss Honey. You're as wet as any of them. If you can't cope in here, then you can go and find a job in some cottonwool private school for rich brats. When you have been teaching for as long as I have, you'll realize that it's no good at all being kind to children. Read Nicholas Nickleby, Miss Honey, and Mr. Dickens. Read about Mr. Wackford Squeers, the marble headmaster of Dotheboys Hall. He knew how to handle the little brutes, didn't he? He knew how to use a bridge, didn't he? He kept their backsides so warm you could have fried eggs and bacon on them. A fine book, that. But I don't suppose this bunch of morons we've got here will ever read it, because by the book of them, they are never going to learn to read anything. I read it, Matilda said quietly. The Trunchbull flicked her head around and looked carefully at the small girl with dark hair and deep brown eyes sitting in the second row. What did you say? She asked sharply. I said I read it, Miss Trunchbull. Read what? Nicholas Nickleby, Miss Trunchbull. You are lying to me, madam, the Trunchbull shouted, glaring at Matilda. I doubt there's a single child in the entire school who has read that book, and here you are on a unhatched shrimp, sitting in the lowest form there is, trying to tell me a whopping free lie like that. Why do you do it? You must take me for a fool. Do you take me for a fool, child? Well, Matilda said. Then she hesitated. She would like to have said, well, I jolly well do. But that would have been suicide. Well, she said again, still hesitating, still refusing to say no. The Trunchbull sensed that the child was thinking, and she didn't like it. Stand up when you speak to me, she snapped. What is your name? Matilda stood up and said, My name is Matilda Wormwood, Miss Trunchbull. Wormwood, is it? The Trunchbull said. In that case, you must be the daughter of the man who owns Wormwood Motors. Yes, Miss Trunchbull. He's a crook, the Trunchbull shouted. A week ago, he sold me a second-hand car that he said was almost new. I thought he was a splendid fellow then, but this morning, I was driving that car to the village. The entire engine fell out on the road. The whole thing was filled with sawdust. The man's a thief and robber. I'll have his scheme for sausages, you see if I don't. He's clever at his business, Matilda said. Cover my foot, Turnbull shouted. Miss Honey tells me that you are meant to be clever too. Well, madam, I don't like clever people. They are all crooked. You are most certainly crooked. Before I fell out with your father, he told me some very nasty stories about the way you behave at home. But you better not try anything in this school, young lady. I shall be keeping a very careful eye on you from now on. Sit down and keep quiet.